something that's done after everything has been migrated already. Am I still making any sense?
Yep.
Okay. So that was context settings. That's what I think we need to try to achieve. A lot of the discussion on the thread was what's the best way of achieving it. I think there was a proposal of add something in the crowbar.yaml, and there was a lot of opposition to that. And I think we kind of moved beyond that, other than Victor, who really likes crowbar.yaml. There was a proposal to have something that feels Railsy, meaning convention over configuration, just put things in one place and good things would happen, in a known place and good things would happen. And I think Ralph started injecting into the conversation, can we just use packaging constructs like init scripts and so on, and just use those. Did I miss any of the suggestions?
Using packages?
I think that's what the init scripts for packages. I think that's what I was trying to describe. Sorry if I didn't do it justice.
Oh, I see. Well, okay. In that case, post install hooks or scripts within the package is another.
Okay.
So some of the tasks you mentioned are probably not that well suited for post-install scripts, like running database migrations. It's probably hard to implement in post-install hooks inside packaging. Yeah.
That was my.
Because
So, sorry, Ralph. Can you continue?
General, if you database migrations require the database server to be running, and when you install packages, it's probably not the case that the database server is running, especially when you install a package for the first time before you run any.
Yep, I agree. While I'm not a packaging expert, that was my gut feeling that these are actions that you want to do in a slightly different time. Although it depends. One assumption we can make, and I don't know how badly it breaks package management, is that you can only install that there are package dependencies, right? So you can say that every Barclamp that is distributed as a package has a dependency on the Crowbar main package already being installed. That's reasonable, and potentially
and that actually could have a dependency on the database package. I mean, there's
the problem though is if I understand package managers correctly, the dependencies are around being installed, not being running, and
right.
And it's kind of bad practice to require something to be running in order for a package to be installed. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So are we reaching the conclusion that we probably don't want to do this as post-install scripts?
Yeah, I think, for those use cases, that then I can see that, like, displayed init scripts or similar can make sense because then they get run later on, not at runtime rather than install time.
Okay.
Or somewhere in between.
So that's potentially. So we'll need to think a little about the whole process. I haven't thought about packaging. I'm sorry. So we'll need to think about the workflow. What does it mean to install a package versus to install a Barclamp? Is it the workflow first? You install the package that lays down the files in the right place, and then you take a separate action in Crowbar to actually import the Barclamp and make it available to Crowbar. I'm not sure that we want to necessarily tackle it now.
I mean, well, but this is something that came up yesterday in the Chef Pack, which was the use of Burp Shelf. And conceivably, so let me step back. I'm actually sort of neutral on this. I like the idea of packaging a lot. We just have to make sure we cover the actions that we're doing, and it could be that this is something we can migrate towards. But inside of the install process for Crowbar has several phases to it, and Victor jump in and correct me when I get this wrong, because I know I will. The first, thank you. The first phase is that we lay down the files in the right place. We have to install Chef. We have to install some prerequisites. Installing Chef is not something we want to have to keep. We want that to go away. And then we actually use the Crowbar cookbook to install all of the other dependencies, right? So it sets up the Rails app, it sets up permissions, it does a whole bunch of stuff that would normally be done in a packaging system, and all those things come in. And then, actually, in the middle of that is this Barclamp install process. And the Barclamp install process, it actually goes in and moves things into specific directories, and it also uploads all of the cookbooks into Chef, which is potentially we could use Burke Shell for another mechanism to do, because once again, we're trying to move away from the Chef dependency.
We potentially want to move that into the Chef Barclamp.
Correct.
As opposed to the import action.
Yes. And so, but what I'm identifying is that there's big blocks of functionality today that are very wired into how we use Chef that could be done or should be done by the Chef Barclamp much later in the process. Those actions are I don't think packaging actions. I don't think the Chef actions are packaging related. I think they're the Barclamp actions.
But you got it partially right, at least.
Yay!
What actually happens right now is first thing we do is we install Chef, and that's it. We install Chef, and it's there in its bin. Then we install all of the Barclamps, including the Crowbar Barclamp. The Barclamp installs. And all that does is lay file systems down on the database, and it handles all the uploading of cookbooks and uploading of cookbooks, template proposals, and all that other fun stuff. Then on the admin node, we inject a skeleton that loads in the basic Crowbar role, which then we run Chef, and that Crowbar role goes through and got the rest of the Chef web UI, and does the rest of the Barclamp UI as well.
Victor, you're breaking up.
And also, I think it's good sharing knowledge, but is it leading us towards the decision or changing the proposal that's right?
Yes.
Well, I'm telling you that all I'm telling you right now is how things happen right now. The main thing to be aware of is that at Barclamp install time, when you're bringing up an admin node, the Crowbar web UI is not none of the Crowbar web servers are running.
Right. And that we probably need.
The only thing that we have to rely on is that Chef is there.
Well, we have.
And none of the other auxiliary packages that we would need to even run database migrations are there.
Right. Fair enough, but we also have a separate process for the UI where we can actually go and import a Barclamp, and effectively.
Yeah, then that.
And effectively, that also is available via the CLI, which effectively that's what the main Crowbar install does.
Well, the importing of Barclamp just lays down a file, and then it goes through basically the install process.
Exactly. But so we have, I think, even in Crowbar 1, we have two ways of installing Barclamp. We have the install Barclamp. Okay, not two ways.
Completely, that they're identical. They are not different ways. One happens at install time.
Let me try to use slightly different words. We have two workflows of installing Barclamps. We have the workflow that installs all the default Barclamps during the main Crowbar install, and we have a workflow where a user can trigger installing a Barclamp through the GUI that uses the same tools and uses the same mechanisms and effectively restarts Crowbar. But from a workflow perspective, they happen at different times and make a slightly different assumption around what's available. Mm-hmm. I think we want to move effectively. We will have the Crowbar framework as one package that basically lays down the basics. Right. Then we will have the Chef Barclamp, which potentially is special, hopefully only special to the extent of being high on the order of Barclamps being installed, and then we're going to have all the other Barclamps that can possibly be installed as independent packages, relying on those previous two.
That makes sense. I mean,
Is that what we're trying to go? I was trying to propose that as a question, not.
We definitely. Actually, I'll pause to let other people talk.
Or actually, isn't SUSE Cloud currently installed, the SUSE Cloud 1.0 installing from packages? Is that the process that you guys...
It's sort of rapid.
Yeah, right. We are installing purely from packages.
So how did you handle the Chef, Crowbar, and other Barclamps breakup?
Oh, we have one, like you mentioned, the basic Crowbar package, which lays down the core. We have separate packages for all the Chef dependencies and Chef itself. And then we have a package for every Barclamp, which does not, normal Crowbar does not include any of the dependencies of that Barclamp, but just the Barclamp, which means the Chef recipes and the web application.
But not the packages that we currently pull into a Barclamp. Okay.
And I imagine that those packages have you kind of arrange the dependencies such that Chef will always be installed before as a person is installing the Crowbar Barclamp and so on.
And up to, I think, many of that for Cloud 1.0 happens manually, like defining the dependencies, but we're working on like generating those dependencies automatically.
Well, yeah, when we generated the spec files, we automatically took the dependencies from the Crowbar.yaml, but now we actually, when we build any Barclamp package, it will automatically at build time incorporate the dependencies from the YAML file into the package that's being built.
Okay. So when you
there's a hard code dependency from every Barclamp onto the Crowbar top level package.
So the Crowbar top level package includes all the core Barclamps, like the DNS, NTP, provisioner, or is it just what's in the?
No, that
basically just includes the Barclamp install script and
install Chef.
Yeah, the install Chef.
Yeah,
and these kind of things.
There's a Barclamp for every single. There's a package for every single Barclamp, and plus the top level. So it exactly mirrors the Git repositories.
Okay.
There's one Git repository per package, or vice versa.
So the install chefs. Sorry, I maybe I should have looked at the code before this conversation. But the install chef script, the Dell install chef script, goes and touches other Barclamps like the DNS and the provisioner to basically reflect like the DNS name and the IP address in a couple of places, and to generate, for example, the machine install key and a few other that live outside of the core Crowbar. So does that mean that you effectively first have to install all the core Barclamps and only then run install chef? Or how are you handling that?
Yes.
Okay. So in your current packages...
We didn't solve that. Sorry, we didn't solve that by dependencies, but by another mechanism called a pattern, which is just a list of packages that are required by a specific product. So when you install a pattern Crowbar to be installed or something, and that pulls in all those core Barclamps.
Yeah, well, all the Barclamps, in fact.
Effectively,
yeah. It pulls in everything in one go, even the OpenStack Barclamps. By the way, the sync-in page that we're using for this, the sprint to 2013, 1, 17, for those people, I see not everybody's on that page right now, but I've documented the current workflow as you just described it, and then added some annotations for how it works in the SUSE case. So it's what you're doing is very, very similar to what we're doing. It's just the file delivery mechanism we use packages rather than just sort of changing an ISO.
Okay. So, and I guess the main benefit there is around version management and updates that can be smaller.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
and you can also have, Barclamp can depend on other system packages as well, for instance.
To me, it makes a ton of sense. The things that Andy's doing with adding these actions are actually part of the packaging comprehension already, which is that you can execute scripts as part of a package.
Well, yes and no. The problem is the timing is slightly different, right? This is the whole discussion around some of our install actions, like need things running.
So let me split this into two conversations. One is I think we probably want to move to packages as the way of deploying Barclamps to get the basics in, right? Mm-hmm. That's one thing. I believe, Victor, you're on that camp or not?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Our current scheme is deliberately incredibly stupid, and I'd like to move to something smarter, better integrated with the core with the base operating system.
So since Victor is ambivalent, I think I'm going to suggest that we consider that item closed. That we are going to move towards having Crowbar use operating system packages to bring in the bits instead of our own TARs.
Yep.
Okay. That's one.
Is somebody documenting this?
We're never going to run on Windows, right? We're making a commitment to say that we're going to use Linux packages across the board. You can use MSIs.
Yes.
We're going to auto-generate MSIs for everything. It'll be awesome.
So we don't. If that was a regression, I would spend more time. We're not cutting off Windows, but we're not regressing any functionality. I don't know.
Yeah.
I am not worried about that just yet. Second point, and this I think is going to take more work, but I believe everybody is on board with that the Chef install should not be a prerequisite for the Crowbar UI being available.
I think that is more of a long-term goal right now. In the very short term, until we find until we write like a script jig, like we do the very basic stuff we need to bring up Chef or whatever mechanism. Yeah, it's not something that I put as a goal to do for tomorrow. That way.
I am in favor of that approach. The question I have is that Chef 11 is out in beta officially yesterday, and according to Matt Ray, it includes an omnibus installer for Private Chef that might dramatically simplify running of Chef. I haven't tried it.
Well, they've been doing omnibus installers for a while.
I have to see if that's the same. One of the issues that we had with the previous omnibus installer was that it relied on being able to go out and touch the internet to pull down everything that it needed.
During build or install?
Yeah.
There are also some issues with regard to packaging in Omnibus installer. I think it doesn't quite fit together, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the other issue. If we're going to use the omnibus installer, then we may as well
Tarballs.
Tarballs or just having a convention that everything that messes with Chef or Ruby, we're just going to use raw gems instead of packaging. I don't like that convention. But
we don't like that either.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, could we make Chef a prerequisite? No, because we still need to touch the internet.
What about Chef?
So we're
no, because we.
Well, we'd have to play with the current omnibus installer to see if it still has the same flaws. All I'm saying is that the ones they had out there for Chef 10 and earlier,
right?
They assumed you had a working internet connection whenever you were going to bring up Chef server.
Which for the Dell installs is an that's an anti requirement.
Yeah.
It's the same for us. We can work with an internet connection available, but it's not a requirement for our product. So Yeah.
For us, it's a requirement not to have one.
Yeah. Can we interrupt for a second? I'm not sure why. How did we end up talking about the Omnibus installer? I think what you're trying to say is we want to upgrade to Chef 11, and you're proposing that as a question, or
no? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get us to a point where we agree that the install is complete when the Crowbar web app is running, and Chef does not have to be installed to accomplish that.
I think we can agree that, and we don't need to care about the Omnibus installer.
Yeah, I agree. And
let's take that.
Victor raised a reasonable objection, which is that we actually use Chef to install Crowbar to get to that state. So
I think somebody who's brown, we can actually use Chef Solo that doesn't require. Sorry?
That's Chef.
Okay, so we can actually use Chef Solo that doesn't require the full Chef server. Right? We can install it. You guys package Chef client
to get the install bootstrap.
Yes.
What does the bootstrap actually need to do? Is it complicated or not?
It's not extremely complicated. It effectively brings up the Rails app.
Yeah, Victor, do you want to go through the things that it does? Because it does more than that. It does a lot. It renames the machine, networking stuff.
I have to, well, if you're talking about that part, that's just the contents of the install chef script, which handles more than what we want to. We want to replace most of that with just stuff that gets happened as we install packages.
Okay.
Or manually in the case of the machine rename. But
so I know we use Chef as part of the bootstrapping. Currently, it's used to install dependencies, right? But clearly, if we're using packages, then we can use the native dependency resolution to handle that part of the bootstrap.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, when we use Chef to install packages, it just falls back under the native package manager anyway. So.
Right.
So the other actions. So in the install process, there's Victor. I'm trying to paraphrase what you said. So there's stuff that we currently handle in the install Chef stuff that is basically mostly Bash, and at that point, after we install the Chef server, we also make the admin node be the Crowbar node, and we do a Chef run to effectively bring up the web UI. And that part is...
And then once that run finishes, then we walk through the rest of bringing up the admin node, transitioning it through the various states.
Okay, and that effectively triggers additional Chef client runs with progressively more recipes.
Yeah, that adds in the ganglia roles and and all that other stuff.
And the second half of this call, we're going to discuss how those things are actually, we're going to refactor them. So a lot of those are actually getting pulled out.
Yeah, I think you just described that a minute ago, right? So in the refactor, and we probably want to stop at the point where the web UI, the Crowbar web UI is ready.
Correct.
Okay, somebody put us on hold.
Victor, would you be able...
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch to 8-3.
I'm going to see if I can figure out who that is.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch to 8-3.
All right. Is that clear? I'm going to start dropping people if... all right, so people need to make sure that their names... Okay, we're done with that. Good. So...
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that if Victor could hop onto the Crowbar sync-in page and maybe, anyone really, and flesh out the current workflow that I've listed there so that we can visually see what are the steps that are there right now, and then we can sort of refactor them to the section below where I've listed desired workflow.
Anything I put right there basically would be a copy and paste of the stuff that's been installed Chef right now. But Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I mean. It's like a summary of what install chef does, which is, a high-level thing. I mean, I think, Ralph and I have an idea of what's in there as well, because we hacked install chef to pieces in a nasty way when we took our copy of it. But, your memory is probably fresher than ours in terms of the overall kind of workflow.
Yeah. Where's the ticket page for this one? For this meeting?
If you just sort by, I'll IM it to you.
I put it in the join me chat. I don't know whether you can still see that.
One thing that's missing there, Adam, is the whole part about that Victor mentioned, that we walk the admin node through its various states. So by the end of each, so there's the transition stuff. If you want, I can add it. I didn't want to conflict with.
Yeah, the bulk of the work happens when we're walking things through the state.
So we're proposing that we will not do that anymore, right? That there will be no side effects that rely on other Barclamps being installed as part of walking the admin node through its states.
And then instead, the act of installing the act of installing the provision of Barclamp on the admin node itself would trigger whatever is needed to bootstrap the provision of the fixer in place. Is that basically what we're suggesting there?
That would make sense, yeah.
Well, I think that the intent is that each Barclamp, once the web UI is there and the core and the database is running and the set of prerequisites are there, as you install additional Barclamps, they would do what's needed, right? So when you install the provisioner, it will start
the provision. It would have to create a default proposal, add the admin node to that proposal, add the right roles, and apply it. And
the important point here is that it can do that without Chef, because we're moving all that to the database, so that you can create all those roles and the relationships in the database, and then go to Chef and say, okay, here is the information, here's the roles that you have to create, here's the information that you need, here's the attributes to make those decisions. So a big part of why the install change and the Crowbar and the Chef refactors is tied is because we do a whole bunch of stuff automatically that we're now modeling in the database and have to then tell Chef explicitly. And so these things are actually very tied together, because we're going to break the install when we change the inherent stuff.
But you need to break it more than it already is?
I'm going to. That's what I want to talk about in the second half of this call.
Oh boy.
A lot more.
So one thing that's, just to round up this conversation, we probably still want the option of a single line, make my Crowbar run, right? So the scenarios you just described, where you have, there's many separate steps because you need to install all the packages, and then you potentially need to start Crowbar and then tell each Barclamp to go and do its thing. We still want the user experience that say, types one command and makes that happen, right? I'm assuming.
We want it, but it's not a requirement for pivot. It's not it. Right? Okay. We can pull back if.
The scenario you're describing basically involves rewriting install Chef to do things the new way instead of doing things the old way.
Correct.
Whatever the new way turns out to be.
Well, and to create the packages to do it, and yes.
But so will install Chef in your mind, Victor, do the whole thing, or would it just start Crowbar?
It'll probably just be reduced to rename the host, set up the IP addresses we want, and then install the Crowbar Barclamp. And then once it's verified that the Crowbar Barclamp is installed by banging on the API and saying, getting some sort of trivial hello world response back, it started installing the rest of the packages and walking through their proposal, creating proposal apply stuff.
and their proposal creates are going to happen automatically during
as an install
action. And then the proposal apply is we need to figure that out because that's implicit behavior, right? That's what makes a Barclamp implicit is if the install implies it.
Not just that, but
yeah, and that's why I was mentioning doing install and apply, or the proposal create and proposal apply actions in the script, and not just as an implicit side effect of installing the Barclamp.
I like that a lot.
Okay. Are we good on this topic?
I think we've made as much progress as we can digest. We're going to have to break out and do some research, and I think Victor's going to have some concrete ideas. I can already hear submitting about this. Some of this, guys, I think realizes ambitions we've had for fixing install for a long time. So all that's good. Are we ready to jump to the next topic?
20 minutes left.
And I'm going to try and orchestrate it and not take notes too much. I didn't take much notes last time. So. All right. So the next topic for this, and I'm sort of preambling the stuff that we had in here, but because we've had to do this and we just haven't discussed it well. We are in transition, obviously, from Crowbar 1 to Crowbar 2, and one of the things that we've been talking about was changing the way we apply. We changing from proposals to configurations and instance, which is a database model change. And that in itself is not that big a deal. What is happening as we look at that code is that it's revealing that a lot of our code is lumped into one or two places and should be distributed. Specifically, the service object, which was written to combat some of our threading issues with Chef, as Andy was giving me a background on this morning. And without going into all the history of it, basically the way Crowbar is working right now is it is highly interconnected with Chef and roles and attributes and all this data. And the very definition of Crowbar 2 is to try and decouple those things out, pull them away. And so what we have right now is we have this set of proposal objects, which are really tied to data bags and Chef. We have this service object, which is tightly coupled into how Chef applies things and doesn't apply things. And we have these very skinny Barclamp things that don't really do much. We've delegated, moved all that code into these service objects. And so as part of the refactor, we want to pull that apart. We want the Barclamp code that is specific to how a Barclamp operates and the attributes that we're going to store. Today we rely on Chef Search to handle attribution to a large extent. We need to pull all that out to the Barclamps so that the Barclamps can deal with their own attributes and setting things and maintaining their own configurations and instances of those configurations and the node relationships. All those things today are stored basically in roles sitting in the system in Chef. Those things need to get moved to the database. So that gets pulled out. And then the other parts of it that actually deal with interacting with Chef, those things should be moved into the Chef jig, where it actually does setting the roles. Roles are still a Crowbar concept. Setting attributes, which are a Crowbar concept but changing because we're going to be doing attribute injection. Kicking off runs, which is also a Crowbar concept but is separate, has a distinct thing with Chef. And then bringing data back in from OHI and absorbing it into attributes. So all those things need to be pulled. Right now they're all done in the service object code effectively. That code needs to be distributed into Barclamps and jigs, predominantly, and actually now into install to an extent. And so what we're going to have to do, what I'm recommending is that we're going to pull apart the service object and move it into these new places. we've been building up.
Rob.
Yes.
You're talking about the service object in Crowbar, not the derived objects in the Barclamps, right?
Correct. I am,
Okay.
but it's also there's objects that's inherit from service object in those Barclamps that would also be split, right? A lot of it's going to move to the Barclamp models, but some of it will be moved to the Barclamp parent class because it's generic. Some of it will be moved to the Jig class because it's chef specific. And then a lot of it, we got to move away from these implicit chef storing of the data, and we're actually storing the data in models in Crowbar because Crowbar is becoming the source of that data. I want to pause because I've just explained a lot of stuff that to me is very clear because I know where the code's going to be moving to. I want to make sure that it's comprehensible.
I tried to capture that on the page, so let me know if that's a fair reflection or not.
What's the name of the section? Sorry.
Refactoring proposal.
It's the one underneath refactoring proposal and config, just underneath the one we were doing on.
I don't see anything yet.
Oh, actually, for some reason it's ended up under pending topics.
Well, I think sync in, refresh, sync in.
Well, cut and paste what you have before you do that.
59 was.
I wasn't typing in order to read what you want.
Yeah, I see it. Yes, splitting service object into chef-specific stuff versus Barclamp-specific stuff. And by virtue of splitting into chef-specific stuff, we're splitting into the chef Barclamp-specific stuff. Or really Jig-specific stuff.
Yeah, so when we say Barclamp, we actually mean database model.
I mean the database model of the Barclamp.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's important. And also,
so there's actually three models involved, right? There is the Barclamp. Sorry.
There's three model
groups.
trees, three model graphs.
Yeah. So there's the Barclamp specific data model. For example, the network Barclamp has a lot of information about lots of stuff.
Data, right?
It stores its own data. There's the Barclamp generic model, which talks about roles and nodes and association between them, and
which is
Barclamp instances and Barclamp configurations, and all that stuff is generic to all Barclamps, and it's the core of it is generic to all Barclamps. Barclamps can extend it,
and that takes to add to that takes over all the proposal model.
Exactly. So that's part of. So we were talking for a long time about doing the rename from proposal config to Barclamp instance and Barclamp configuration. That's actually what Rob is proposing, is that as we do the rename, we also actually not just rename the objects, but reflect the right responsibilities in the objects.
And it's actually easier from that perspective in the fact that instead of trying to rename this, we actually are going to move the code to the right places and simplify the service objects confusing.
I totally agree.
What was the third?
I was trying to get to the third, and the last one is basically, well, last one and a half. I like. There is CMDB related data. Oh, Jig. Sorry, let me use the terminology. So Jig data has things that get triggered when a run is triggered, when a proposal apply is triggered. So things like an event, a Jig event, and a set of Jig runs that describe the sequence of execution that needs to happen, that the Jig will track. Sorry?
Andy, you're talking about that as a Rails model?
Yes, it actually exists. If you look at Jig event, a Jig run, those are database models. Those are not reflected in the UI. So this is basically, I've just started putting in pull requests around the delayed job. So delayed job, that's probably a topic for the next community meeting. But where this is going is that The Rails app will describe what needs to happen, and then there's going to be a separate process that will take here's what needs to happen and make it so, and execute and do the communication with Chef, which is the last half of where some of the code will move to, where the code that interacts with Chef and manifests the desired configuration into Chef is now also slightly modeled in the current service object. I could try typing that into Syncin because I'm not seeing anybody typing it.
I lost my connection.
Yeah, but Syncin has been awful today.
Does that make sense? Are there?
The second model you mentioned, Andy, the generic bar clamp, is that a model of the Crowbar web app itself as opposed to some other bar clamp?
Yes, it is. So
okay.
Right now, in Crowbar 1.0, this is effectively managed in Chef, like all our persistent information. And this particular set of things is in the proposal config. So if you look at the elements and element run order and the association of nodes to roles, that's captured, the desired configuration is captured in the proposal. And the in progress as we progress is actually not currently persistent per se anywhere. It's in the run list at any given point in time. It's in the run list of the affected nodes and in memory of what are the next steps. And I think James had some questions about it way back. It's moving into the database. It's going to be persistent, and we'll be able to recover and resume runs across Crowbar app restarts because it's all in the database. Sorry, I gave you a much longer answer than your short question.
Well, it's worth going through how big of a context shift this is.
Are there any other questions or comments?
So is Jig ready for this?
Jig is in process. I think that's where
there's the code that Jig needs for it is in the service object.
And some of it will need to change.
A lot of it's going to change, but so we're at a point where we are going to have
Well, so Rob,
go ahead.
In the interest of time, because we've been trying to actually keep our meetings to the schedule, to their time allotment. Okay. So one of the things we've been doing so far is try to guarantee that you can take the code, build it into an I0 packages, and install an admin node where you have both Chef and Rails app mostly working, at least to the degree that the admin is installed and you can interact with Chef and Rails app, not necessarily be able to deploy new nodes, but short of that, fully functional admin node.
And the unit tests all work.
Right. The unit tests are actually a lower bar.
Yes, we've had cases where the unit test pass and the admin install fails. We haven't seen many of the other way around.
Because you can run just the Rails app and pass the unit test because you're just checking the model, and the BDD will pass even without Chef on it at this point.
One of the items that we should probably have brought earlier before we only have 7 minutes to discuss it is that we're proposing to change that. The problem is this workflow is very time consuming. So it's just a long work.
Actually, we cannot, so we could work in a branch, which is a simple answer, and we can do all this work on a branch and break everything. I don't think it's reasonable to try to keep the old workflow, which interacts with Chef in an authoritative way, and put in new workflow that interacts with Chef in an authoritative way. There will be conflicts in who has authority. And so this is a breaking change. It's going to take us some time to work through it. It doesn't have to break the unit tests or BDD because those are model tests on Rails and they're not Chef dependent. But it will break the install while we're doing it. It will break the fully running part of the install. And actually, we just spent 40 minutes talking about breaking the install anyway. to also address this same problem of Chef not being, we don't want Chef available during the install. So we have two threads that are actually in harmony of disruptive change.
Mm-hmm. I guess the main question that we want to propose, that you're proposing is, are people okay with us breaking master to the extent of keeping unit tests working but not being able to actually install a product? Or do people want to send about 3 or 4 people to go work on a branch and get a massive pull request at the end of this culmination of work?
Right.
That's the...
We're okay with that as long as the unit test pass, because we don't even have a working install anyway at this point. So.
Okay. Any other voices?
I think we need to have to build an ISO that actually works, that installs right before we do this change, so that for people that need a running admin node in order to be able to do their work, they can at least leverage that.
Okay. Point that
Sounds like tag.
Or just
yeah, well, I mean, if we're going to do that, then we might consider having a fairly long-lived topic branch that we pretty much all work on for the next few weeks or however long it takes.
I would rather just tag it so that we can go back in time if we need to. But if 100% if most of the active team is in this new branch, I would rather just let us stay on Trump while we're breaking. Unit tests will keep passing, but the install is going to be rewritten, right? And the models and the way we interact with Chef are going to be rewritten. As long as we understand that for the next 3 weeks, then we can do it.
Okay.
There's one other thing I want to, if we're good with that decision, there's one other thing I want to do, which is talk through the reemergence plan for, and I'll start typing this down here. So let me describe what the reemergence plan for Barclamps means, and I'll do it real fast. So the reemergence plan is that we're going to break a whole bunch of stuff, but we need to know the order that we're going to have the Barclamps coming back in on, because they're going to come back in groups and they're going to come back in order, and that'll help people stage. So, for example, the Crowbar Barclamp has got to be the first thing that comes back, right? Then the provisioner. Wayne, this is part of what you need to know, and the deployer are going to need to come back next.
DNS.
And DNS. Okay, and then after we need, so like things like so this, we have first wave, we have core, network. I just lost my connection, network.
I don't think we have the time.
Network's in second. So,
Rob, I agree with what you're trying to do. I think we need a little more research in order to actually count them up. I think that the first couple you listed, yes, we need Crowbar. I'm not sure exactly where we're going to put network, because we need minimal networking working. Potentially what the installer will do is sufficient, so I'm going to propose that. If we get to the point where we can install the Crowbar framework and the Crowbar Barclamp and the Chef Barclamp,
right,
I'd call us good, great, and we can potentially at that point focus on purely on bringing in the other Barclamps, and we can split it among the team, and it can be very effective. And the order is less important.
That's exactly the point I wanted us to get to, Eddie. There are core ones. We need to create Trello cards for the migration so that we can track the progress and make it visible. And then we are not planning to touch the non-core ones because we want to expand the effort into to have more people helping get those migrated.
Does that make sense? Did we lose the phone?
No, that makes sense to me. That's like...
One more thing. So I think we're good to put this aside. This are done for the topic for today. One thing that I think I want to propose as a schedule agenda for the next meeting would be to talk about our learnings from the day of Chef for OpenStack yesterday and the emergent patterns that we've been talking about attribute injected recipes, which part of bringing in the other Barclamps would involve starting at a minimum to make progress towards converting the recipes to be attribute injected. And I think we need to demystify the term. What does it mean to be attribute injected?
So our next planning meeting is on the 31st. I'm going to recommend we do a 10 a.m. catch-up session to check in on this topic and that topic on the 29th at 10 a.m. Does that sound reasonable for people?
Yeah.
I know we want to try and do fewer of these meetings, but we're at a very critical juncture, and if you guys are willing to do it, I think it helps keep us on the same page.
I agree.
Okay.
10 Central?
10 Central.
Same as today.
Same as today.
On the 29th.
On the 29th. I'm going to add it to the calendar, and I will invite the Crowbar mailing list like I have been doing. Does that work for people?
I'm not sure I saw any of those emails, but it sounds good in principle.
Okay. I will go and make sure they're not getting held up in the queue.
As a side note, I've been bitten by it a couple of times. The Crowbar mailing list seems to have a 4K limit. If your message is above 4K, it gets into a moderation queue. So be judicious about how much of the original email thread you keep.
So I'm officially saying that the meeting topic is going to be Chef OpenStack attribute injection and refactor update.
I think we're over time by a minute or two. So unless there are other topics that absolutely must be discussed today, we need to be respectful of people's time. Are we good to adjourn?
I think so. We're happy. I mean, from my perspective, that was really useful. Yeah, very useful.
Good. Thank you. And we'll coordinate online about the install changes.
Oh, one more thing. I think we need to be honest. We're having networking issues because our IT team decided to help us be more secure and less efficient. Sorry about that. That's it means that it impacts Join Me a little, and it might impact IRC.
Can we rent different offices?
Would people be okay? Can we do Google Hangouts from the office?
No.
Yes.
Nice try. Failed.
All right, so I'll just do it.
Let's use the mailing list, and if need be, individual emails. We are actively working on resolving this, but
I can
accept our apologies.
I can host Join Me from my home, and I will do that for the next Join Me meeting.
Yeah.
Oh shoot! I guess maybe I'll do it for that's.
We will resolve this. We don't need to keep the call open. Just apologies. We're working on it.
Patience.
I guess with that, we can adjourn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.